All right, so after a very, very active period of free agency, how does each team stand compared to where they went in going into free agency? That's what I hope to break down today in my official tier list, breaking down how each team performed in free agency in 2024. Before we dive into this, I want to acknowledge the fact that I am a little bit late to the party. Things have been a little bit crazy this last week, especially as I've been settling right back into the semester, as we just got off a spring break. So, things have been a little bit crazy settling back in, but we are settled back in and we are locked and loaded. So more content will be coming for you right out the gate here pretty soon. And let's go ahead and dive into this tier list. Alright, so we had a little bit of a camera malfunction here between scenes. Jason didn't charge his camera. Very, very, very professional, very good. But let's go ahead and start things off here with the Arizona Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals, they didn't really do a whole lot. I forgot to rename these, so we're going to put winners, improved. We have meh, because they didn't really do a whole lot, or they just didn't really do much. Got worse. And we'll have losers. Alright, so Arizona Cardinals, I think they really fall under the meh. I mean, you really didn't have a massive, huge gain. Yeah, you got players like Sean Murphy-Bunting, but you lost Marquise Brown. You traded Rondale Moore to bring in Desmond Ridder, but that doesn't really move the needle a whole lot. They really didn't do a whole lot this offseason. I mean, they brought in DJ Dallas, which is another good addition, but nothing really that's moving the needle too terribly much. Alright, so moving on now to Atlanta, and the big signing of free agency was Kirk Cousins, but they signed him at a very, very expensive deal for what he was worth. I really don't think they should have signed him to that kind of a deal. I think they fall in the meh because, they brought in their quarterback that'll help them win games, but Kirk Cousins is not worth $45 million a year compared to what he can do for you. Yeah, they brought in players, like they traded for Rondale Moore, they brought in Ray McCloud, which can be helpful. But when you lose players like Van Jefferson, you trade Desmond Ridder, you lose some other players, and you really didn't do a whole lot to bring in new talent around Kirk Cousins. Yeah, this team was talented, but they really didn't do a whole lot to improve. They didn't really do a lot to fall off, though. Alright, for the Baltimore Ravens, they did a very interesting move in free agency. So the big thing they lost was Patrick Queen, linebacker to the Pittsburgh Steelers. That is a massive, massive loss for this team. But going through the rest of their stuff, they didn't really lose too terribly much. I mean, they lost players, but they didn't really lose a lot of massive, massive pieces to their team. Now, they did lose Gus Edwards, which is potentially a big loss. They lost Morgan Moses, but, those are recoupable losses. And to basically offset those losses, they brought in Derrick Henry. And I really feel like that does a lot to offset the Patrick Queen deal. So I'm going to put them under the meh because they really did. They brought in a big player. They kept a lot of their core players, especially signing Madubuike to that deal in the offseason. That was a massive, massive thing for them. And the fact that, they lost some players, but the biggest one they lost, they kind of replaced by getting Derrick Henry. Alright, now the Buffalo Bills, there's no way around it. They got worse. They had an absolute fire sale of cutting prior to free agency, and they didn't really do a lot to bring in players. I mean, they brought in a couple players here and there, but they lost a lot as well. They lost, let's see, just going through this, Leonard Floyd, Jordan Poyer, Mitch Morse, Naheem Hines. They lost Ryan Bates. They lost, just going through this, Poona Ford, Trent Sherfield, Gabe Davis, a big loss. They brought in some other pieces, but they didn't really do a lot to offset the losses that they had. So overall, the losses the gains do not offset the losses, and they got worse as a result. Okay, Carolina. Carolina, you made an incredible move this offseason. You're able to get some help for your quarterback by trading Dante Jackson for Deontay Johnson. You brought in Von Bell, Hayden Hurst. You did a lot of stuff right this offseason. I mean, you lost some pieces, like you lost Frankie Louvu, you traded Brian Burns, but overall, you did a lot with the situation you had. You had an absolutely horrendous situation, and you did a lot to help bring in players to make your team better. You got yourself in a better spot, and you overall improved as a result. Okay, Chicago, there's no way around it. You guys were winners, absolute winners of free agency. Being able to bring in Keenan Allen, you were able to do a lot of stuff right. You brought in Keenan Allen. You did trade Justin Fields, which I think you got hosed for, but you brought in Kevin Byard, Gerald Everett, Ryan Bates. Yeah, you lost Justin Fields and Justin Jones. But overall, you also brought in Coleman Shelton. DeAndre Swift was the big one, the first signing of free agency for him. You really did a lot to help out your team in significant ways that will make you a way better team. The big thing I think that could hold them back is going to be Caleb Williams next year. Alright, Cincinnati, there's no way around it. You guys got worse as a result of the offseason. Yeah, you brought back Von Bell, which was, pretty solid. You brought in Mike Gesicki, who's a solid player for what he is, and you brought in Trent Brown. And you got Geno Stone and Zach Moss. But overall, I mean, you are in a situation where T. Higgins is out the door, and you're not really in a good spot in general with where you are at. You lost also Awuzie, you lost Jonah Williams, you lost Irv Smith Jr., and those are not massive losses, but overall the Bengals are in a bit of an interesting pickle, and I really don't feel like they brought in the right good players to help this team get better, and they're losing one of their top wide receivers in T. Higgins. Staying in the division, the Cleveland Browns, I feel they improved this offseason. You were able to bring in running back Nyheim Hines, you stole Jerry Jeudy from the Broncos, Quentin Jefferson from the Jets, you got Devin Bush, a washed-up Devin Bush at that point. But overall, you did some really solid moves. You didn't really lose a lot of big players, necessarily. I mean, yeah, you lost Joe Flacco, but at the same time, he wasn't your guy. You knew that starting next season was going to be Deshaun Watson's team. So you really didn't lose a lot, and you got a lot to help you out in big ways. So therefore, you improved. Okay, now we're moving up to a team that, do they exist? I don't know. The Dallas Cowboys, they had an absolute... In fact, you know what? I'm actually about ready to move them down to the got worse. Even free agency losers, just because of the fact that they did absolutely nothing. Looking at their moves, they signed Eric Kendricks from the Chargers. They re-signed Jordan Lewis. They re-signed TJ Godwin, and they re-signed Trent Sieg. You lost Tyler Biadasz. You lost Neville Gallimore. Dante Fowler Jr. is a pretty big loss. Tyron Smith and Dorrance Armstrong and Tony Pollard. Massive, big losses for this team, and you did nothing to make your team better as a result. You guys are big free agency losers. Denver, you guys got absolutely hosed. You lost the offseason because, well, you really didn't do anything for quarterback. There was a lot of quarterbacks moving around, and you did nothing to help fix your big glaring hole at quarterback after Russell Wilson was going to be cut. You lost Russell Wilson. You got hosed in the Jerry Jeudy trade. You just got hosed in general as a result. Okay, Detroit, you're going to go under Matt. I mean, yeah, you lost some pieces. You lost like Jonah Jackson. You lost Benito Jones, Anthony Pittman. You lost some pieces and you gained some pieces like Carlton Davis and Marcus Davenport, but you really didn't. Nothing really moved the needle too much for me with Detroit. So I'm going to put them under Matt because they really didn't do a lot of big moves that make a huge difference for this team. Green Bay, I'm going to say you guys improved. Yeah, you lost Aaron Jones, but you brought in Josh Jacobs. You also brought in Xavier McKinney. You had some massive gains, and your losses aren't really that bad. I mean, yeah, you lost Darnell Savage and Aaron Jones, but overall, you brought in some good pieces, and you retained a lot of your free agents, so you did get better and improved as a result of the offseason. Not enough to be winners, but you certainly improved. Houston, you're in the same boat. You guys made some moves to help your team. You didn't really do any massive splashes, but you made some solid improvements to help this team get better into the next season, and that's all you got to do is you just got to keep building that roster so that you're going to be competitive with CJ Stroud, and he'll keep you in it. All right, the Colts, I don't know what to do with you guys. I'm trying to figure out where to put you, and you really didn't do a lot, and you lost some players. You lost like Isaiah McKenzie, or no, you got Isaiah McKenzie. No, never mind, you lost Isaiah McKenzie. I don't know what I'm doing. You lost Isaiah McKenzie. You lost Zach Moss. You lost some pretty solid pieces. You didn't really bring in a lot. So I'm going to say you did get a little bit worse. Just because, yeah, you retained a lot of your players. You definitely got worse by the least amount compared to these other teams here. But I do feel like you did get worse as a result of free agency. Based off of some of those losses and the fact the only new player you have in the building is Raekwon Davis. Alright, Jacksonville, I really feel like you guys did a lot to improve this offseason. You didn't improve by a lot, but you improved a little bit. You improved a little bit more than I would put you in math for. You were able to bring in some good receivers. You brought in Devin Duvernay, a great return specialist, and can be a wide receiver as needed. You also brought in Gabe Davis, which was the crown jewel of your free agency period. Now, you did lose some pieces. You lost Calvin Ridley. You lost Darius Williams. You lost some pieces. But overall, I feel like the players you brought in are going to be massive, especially considering that you were able to keep Josh Allen off the franchise tag is a massive, massive thing. And you managed to trade for Mac Jones, which is going to give you a little bit of help behind your quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. It's not really a massive help, but it is a help nonetheless. All right, moving on to the Chiefs here. I really think this offseason was a kind of a meh. I mean, you lost some pieces, you got some pieces. You know what, actually, the more I look at this, the more I think you guys improved. You got some massive, massive help from Patrick Mahomes by signing Hollywood Brown and Irv Smith Jr. Those are massive pieces at a position that was very, very weak for you guys last season at the receiving core. Massive help for Patrick Mahomes is going to help big time. Now, going on to the Chargers, what else do I have to say? You're free agency losers. You lost almost your entire receiving core. If we look at your receivers, Keenan Allen went to the Bears. Mike Williams, not on the roster. I think he signed a deal with the Jets, if I'm not mistaken. This hasn't updated yet, but he's gone. Looking at your other receivers, Jalen Guyton, he's not rostered next year. Alex Erickson, he's not rostered next year. Keelan Doss, he's not rostered next year. You have no receivers, and you're not bringing anything back. You brought in some pieces, but not a lot. You brought in Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst for tight ends, considering you lost Joe Everett, but it's not really going to be massive, as overall it really feels like this team just is massively worse than the team they had leaving the regular season under a new head coach. Alright, now going over to the Los Angeles Rams, they definitely improved as well. Not just because I have that flag behind me, but they also just improved in general. You kept some pretty solid key players. Yeah, you lost Coleman Shelton, but you brought in Jonah Jackson for your offensive line. You were able to bring back Darius Williams, Colby Parkinson, and you got Cameron Curl. Now, you did lose like Ernest Brown, you lost some other players, but not really a whole lot that you lost, considering what you had. You have a good thing going, and you brought in some massive, massive help in that offensive line, especially in the secondary, which were massive positions of need for this team. Now, the Raiders, what to do with you guys? I don't know. I think I was going to put you under losers, but I think I'm going to put you under got worse. Because, yeah, you got significantly worse by not bringing back Josh Jacobs, but you did get a solid runner in Alexander Madison. You brought in Gardner Minshew to help at the quarterback position a little bit. And you did some decent stuff. You retained some players, but you did lose some pieces that are going to be pretty well felt. But overall, I feel like this team they did get worse. They are borderline losers in free agency. I just don't know if they met the criteria enough because they did offset their losses to a certain degree, especially the running back position. All right, going to the Dolphins here, I'm going to put you guys under got worse because you guys did lose some pieces of that offensive or to that defensive core, especially. Jerome Baker's a big one. You were also lost Christian Wilkins, Andrew Van Ginkel, Deshaun Elliott. You lost some massive pieces of that defense. You did bring in some help to help offset it, like Kendall Fuller. Like, even just kind of scrolling through these, you brought in Jordan Poyer, you brought in some other help around the board, you know? I feel like overall the pieces you lost are going to be massively felt in many ways around the team, and I'm just not so sure that this is going to be the team that we saw last year that was competing but not always winning games. Now, Minnesota, what to do with you? You guys were active. You brought in Aaron Jones, Sam Darnold, but you lost Kirk Cousins, Daniel Hunter, and Marcus Davenport. I don't know really what to do with you guys. You guys really had an interesting offseason. Let me see what I put you originally. Initially, I put you under slightly worse. And I really feel like that is going to stand, especially losing KJ Osborne is a massive, massive loss for you guys. You did keep Quessenberry, it's a big one. It's a big signing for you guys. It's a big re-signing. But I think I'm going to stick to my guns here and say that you guys did get slightly worse. You don't really have direction at the quarterback position. You brought in some help at the running back position, certainly. But overall, you really didn't do a lot to offset all of your losses for the most part. Now, the Patriots, this is an interesting situation to look at, an interesting case study to look at here, as the Patriots did bring in some help, like Okorafor, if I can say that name right, from the Steelers, brought in Jacoby Brissett. You brought in some other help, you brought in Austin Hooper, you brought in some other, like Antonio Gibson, and you got KJ Osborne, which is a massive, massive help to your next quarterback. And yeah, you traded your quarterback away, but you do have Bailey Zappi still, and you could always draft. You're probably going to draft a quarterback too this year. So I really feel like the losses you had were offset by the gain. So I am going to put you under meh because you really did a good job of offsetting your losses, which is exactly what you want to do in free agency if you can't get any better. Now, moving over to the Saints here, this team really didn't do a lot for me to move the needle, but they did have a massive signing recently of Chase Young, which does bring a lot of help to this front line. They lost some players in other areas, but Chase Young is a massive signing. I am going to throw them under the slightly improved. They brought in Cedric Wilson as a big help at wide receiver, and you got some help on the linebacking core with Willie Gay Jr., and you got Udo from the Vikings for your offensive line, which is another big help. You brought in Nathan Peterman, too, which is an awesome signing for you guys. But seriously, you don't really have him as your quarterback anyway, so I really feel like the Saints did some massive moves to help improve a little bit. They didn't improve massively, but they did improve by a little bit, and that's all you can ask for out of the Saints. Now for the Giants. Oh boy. Well, you lost Saquon Barkley, you lost Tyrod Taylor, A'Shawn Robinson, you traded some other player, or you did some trades though, which were pretty good. You brought in one guy from the Panthers, you got Brian Burns, that was the name, if I could remember. Not always remembering here, but I try to keep these videos pretty raw for you guys. You also brought in Drew Lock. You brought in some other help as well. But you did lose Xavier McKinney, which is another massive, massive loss for you guys. Looking at what you guys did, I am going to throw you guys under the got worse because you really did feel like you got a lot worse. Your offense just doesn't really have that soul anymore. You don't have Saquon, who's always going to be your safety rock. So I really feel like that offense is going to be hurting. The defense will look better, but the offense will be hurting under Danny Dimes. So staying in New York, going to the Jets. Let's take a look at what they did. So they lost Jordan Whitehead, safety, but they did bring in some help with that offensive line. That is absolutely massive for this team. This is where they needed to get some help, and they did just that. So looking at the way this team played, that played out the offseason, I'm really thinking this team did get better. They weren't quite winners, but they are definitely an improved unit from what they were last season, as they did exactly what they had to do. They improved the offensive line to get Aaron Rodgers some help. If you do that, this team will compete next year, and they will compete hard. Now, Philadelphia. Oh boy. You guys made a lot of moves, and I like a lot of the moves you did. I'm going to throw you guys... Actually, the way I was initially going to throw you guys under improved, I'm almost tempted to throw you guys under winners of free agency with what you did. I mean, you didn't lose a lot of big names. You know, you brought in a lot of big names. You brought in Kenny Pickett, which I don't know if he's going to be any good anymore. He's letting his ego get in the way. I was high on the kid, but not anymore the way he's acting. But you got Bryce Huff off the Jets. You got Devontae Parker, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson Jr., Devin White. And you brought in Saquon Barkley too. So you guys are definite winners of free agency. Compared to your losses, they were not. Your losses were massively, massively offset, I should say, by your gains. So you were definite winners of free agency. Staying in Pennsylvania, going over to Pittsburgh, Steelers are also massive winners. They completely overhauled this roster, which you never see Pittsburgh do. Their quarterback room is entirely different. No more Mason, no more Mitch, no more Kenny. Hello Russ and hello Justin Fields. This team did exactly what they had to do, and they are doing everything right. The Pittsburgh Steelers are finally playing their cards right. They brought in Patrick Queen. They brought in some other help as well. They brought in Van Jefferson for wide receiver. They got Dante Jackson. They brought in a lot of help. They got Deshaun Elliott off the Dolphins. They played this offseason right, in exactly the way they need to play it. Moving on to Seattle now, just taking a look at what you guys did. You really didn't do a lot to bring in help. I know you lost a lot of players. Not really a lot of massive players, but you did lose players nonetheless. And those players were not really expendable for you. And the players you brought in didn't really do a lot to offset what they did. So I really feel like the Seahawks did get a little bit worse as a result of free agency. You brought in Quandre Diggs and Jerome. You know, I'm going to move you into meh, because you did bring in Quandre Diggs and Jerome Baker. But you did lose Will Dissly, Bobby Wagner, Drew Lock, Devin Bush, even though he wasn't really an impact player. But yeah, so I really feel like this team lost a lot, but they did bring in a couple of big guys to help offset some of those losses to a degree. Now going in the same division in the NFC West, going over to the Niners, taking a look at what they did. They brought in some help, certainly, but they also lost some help too. Looking at what they lost compared to what they gained, it doesn't really seem like anything is massive, except for losing Javon Kinlaw and Isaiah Oliver to the Jets. Bringing in Leonard Floyd was a big one, though, but losing Chase Young is massive. I feel like this team did get worse. They didn't get worse by a whole lot, but they did ultimately get worse on the defensive side of the ball as a result of these offseason moves. Now, going over to Tampa Bay, they did what Tampa Bay had to do. They signed their players. They let go. They had what? How many players leave Tampa Bay? 1, 2, 3, 4 players left Tampa Bay. Nick Leverett, Aaron Stinney, Devin White, and Carlton Davis. Those two are the only two big ones that left. You brought in Jordan Whitehead, though, and you brought in Bryce Hall. So I really feel like you did a lot to offset those moves, and you kept the players you needed. So I'm gonna throw you guys under improved, because you guys brought in some good players for a couple of players that weren't really, they were gone, and they are not as good as the caliber of players you brought in. So really, the Buccaneers, I feel like, got better as a result of free agency. Now, going over to Tennessee, I don't know. I mean, you brought in some big help. You basically did a running back swap by bringing in Tony Pollard but losing Derrick Henry. You brought in Awuzie off the Bengals, but you lost some players. You lost some pretty big players like Azeez Al-Shaair, Sean Murphy-Bunting, but you did bring in Calvin Ridley. Scrolling through some more of these, you lost Travis Gibson, but you brought in Mason Rudolph, which could be a big help for Will Levis. I'm going to throw you guys under meh. The way I'm looking at this, it's meh. You didn't really get much better, but you didn't get much worse. Just meh. All right, now going into the last team we have to talk about, the Washington Commanders. Oh my God. So yes, the Commanders lost some players. They lost Curtis Samuel, Kendall Fuller, but they brought in a lot of players. And I'm talking an absolute massive amount. If we scroll through how many players they brought in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 new players into this team. And they are not just your bottom-of-the-barrel players. You brought in Austin Eckler, Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu. You brought in Dante Fowler Jr. You brought in Cleveland Farrell. I mean, you brought in a lot of good players. And I really feel like this team is a lot better as a result. And as a result, they are winners of free agency. They had money to spend, and they spent it. They didn't go for the best players. They went for good, solid players. And that's exactly what this team needs. This team just needs good, solid players. And they'll be fine. They'll be fine. So Washington, massive winners of free agency as well. All right, well, that's about going to do it for me today. If you guys did like, don't forget to smash like and subscribe. It does help you out a whole lot. And ringing the bell, if you subscribe, will also make sure you are notified when I get a new upload. I almost said go live because I've been streaming a lot with Robbie on the side. But either way, I guess with that, make sure you go ahead and check out the video down here. It's one YouTube things you will like. And with that, I will see you guys later. Peace out and have a good one.